Almost let a little girl die in surgery. In Amazing Spider-Man number 700, Doc Ock switches minds with Spider-Man, sort of. Doc Ock, now in Spider-Man's body, is exposed to all of Peter's memories and experiences, and it definitely has an effect. He decides to become a superhero, calling himself the Superior Spider-Man. However, in the first issue of Superior Spider-Man, it's revealed that a portion of Peter is still residing inside of the body, and it has some control over Doc Ock's actions. So later in Superior Spider-Man number 8, the Superior Spidey finds a device that he can use to get rid of the last bits of Peter Parker that remain in his brain. However, in order to gain access to this device, he first has to perform surgery on a little girl. So this leads to a scene where Ghost Spider-Man is like in the background, basically trying to prevent Doc Ock from doing the surgery, knowing that Doc is going to finish off Peter Parker after he's successful. However, Peter does eventually relent and Doc succeeds in his surgery, but for a moment there, it kind of seemed like Pete was ready to let a little girl die so that he could live. Not exactly Spidey's finest hour.
Number 9. Killed MJ. So Peter's track record when it comes to loved ones isn't as bad as someone like Daredevil, but hey, it isn't great either. In alternate universes especially, Spider-Man has caused a lot of harm to those that he's loved, and I mean a lot. And even in the main continuity, his track record isn't so great. In the Marvel Zombies universe, Spider-Man was transformed into a zombie, and as this happened, felt the uncontrollable urge taking over him. He was like, I'm so hungry, I gotta eat people. He tried to tell his loved ones to get away from him, but it was too late, and he ended up not only killing, but full on eating both Mary Jane and his Aunt May. Of course, can we really blame Peter for this one? Not so much. He was a zombie and he wasn't really in control here. But knowing Peter, you can bet he likely reminisced and blamed himself continuously for this for days on end, even while he was a zombie. Because, you know, Peter just loves to blame himself for everything. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick little reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you are enjoying it. It really helps us out at the channel. And thank you if you've already done it.
Number 8. Allowed a kidnapping. In Amazing Spider-Man number 112, we see Spider-Man really worried about Aunt May. She's gone missing after Gwen Stacy gave her a hard time for meddling in Peter's life too much, and he spent most of the previous issue searching for Aunt May. In this issue, we see Spidey has become so distracted, he doesn't even notice this guy getting kidnapped nearby. What's worse, when Pete does notice this guy, who also notices him, he starts the classic Spidey monologue about how helping this poor slob will take hours. Hours he could spend searching for Aunt May. He actually leaves the guy to get kidnapped, saying, maybe someday I'll have the courage to face myself again. Damn, Pete, you could have easily stopped and saved this guy. If that wasn't bad enough, later on it turns out that Aunt May wasn't even missing, she just had a new job. Way to go, Spidey.
Number 7, worst boyfriend ever. I wish I could say this was a one-time instance, but this is one of the worst, most consistent things that we've seen from Peter Parker throughout all of his relationships. He's not only super awkward around the ladies, but also has a tendency to behave badly with his romantic partners as well. For one, Peter very rarely lets people in on his secret of being Spider-Man, which causes a lot of problems early on in relationships that usually end up causing a breakup before things get super serious. And you might be thinking to yourself, but wait a minute, Amanda, hasn't Peter Parker told Mary Jane before that he's Spider-Man? Yes, but she also apparently knew from like day one that he was Spider-Man, so I don't know if that even counts because she knew the whole time. But beyond that, he also says, thinks, and does kind of things that are just in general awful. He snapped at his partners, lied to them, gotten them into all kinds of danger, blamed them for things that weren't their fault, and even at times physically hit them. Like when Mary Jane tried to break up a fight between Peter Parker and his clone Ben Reilly, and in a mindless rage, he slammed her back, causing her to go flying into a wall. Also, Spider-Man is super strong, so even if he like flicked Mary Jane, I imagine that would be terribly painful. Oh, and she was also pregnant at the time with their child, which just makes it even worse.
Number 6. He almost robbed a jewelry store. Okay, I know this isn't supposed to be top 10 things Spider-Man almost did, but I have to mention another really weird out of character Spider-Man moment. In Amazing Spider-Man number 87, Spidey has been suffering from an illness that he determines to be the radioactivity in his blood slowly killing him. He's been feeling delirious for a while and having a hard time using his powers properly, and he's swinging around the city, monologuing, wondering what it means for his future. Suddenly, he remembers it's Gwen Stacy's birthday, classic Peter, and he doesn't have a gift. So in a bizarre moment, we see Spider-Man randomly decide to break into a jewelry store and he steals a necklace for her. He realizes what he's doing before it's too late and he kind of like puts it back, but he's already caused property damage and thank God they don't have cameras because Jameson would just have a field day with that. The whole thing is just a really weird moment. Spider-Man starting to wonder if he's losing his mind. The whole thing was really surprising to me and he almost went through with it.
Number 5, killed MJ again. Yeah, for someone who claims to love her so much, Peter is not very good at treating MJ well. This one comes to us from another alternate reality though, so we do have to, asterisk and add that in there, little editor note. Because of course, Peter would never kill Mary Jane in the main continuity, or more, he just hasn't done so yet. In the reality of Spider-Man Reign, we're taken to a potential future reality where Peter killed Mary Jane simply by loving her. Their being intimate, at least that's what's implied, caused Mary Jane to be exposed to Peter's radioactivity at a level where she ended up getting cancer and dying. His radioactive fluids. Yeah, that's pretty intense. In typical Peter fashion, this becomes one of his greatest regrets, giving MJ cancer, and only serves to basically drive him insane and turn him senile, which really doesn't help anyone and makes for a pretty crazy story when he returns as a bizarre and depressed version of Old Man Spider-Man. Old Man Spider-Man is super depressing.
Number 4. Worked for the Jackal. The whole clone saga was definitely one of Spidey's lowest points, especially just the way that they totally messed with Peter's character throughout the whole thing. He was calling himself the Spider and just acting generally unpleasant, but when he found out that he wasn't the real Peter Parker but a clone, he really didn't receive that news very well. The Jackal somehow ends up convincing Pete to work with him, and somehow Peter buys it, even though it means working against his friend Ben Reilly. Peter eventually does come to his senses, but man, how could he have ever been convinced to work with the supervillain in the first place? Every time I look back on this era, I remember why people hate it so much. Both versions of Spider-Man are pretty decent, but the way that they're pitted against one another as if there can only be one and everything, the whole thing just felt kind of forced.
Number 3 was too apathetic. Spider-Man's apathy is something that haunts him to this day and makes him pretty much the one to blame for his Uncle Ben's death. Well, I personally think Peter is much too hard on himself here, and that being that harsh only leads to more disasters later down the road that his intense sense of responsibility has a hand in causing, but I digress. Peter for sure thinks this is the worst thing he has ever done, allowing the man who would go on to kill his uncle to get past him. At the time when the guard who pursued the criminal asked for help, Peter simply didn't see the point in aiding. That wasn't his job, he thought. He wasn't a hero. However, afterward he learned that with great power comes great responsibility, a lesson that has haunted him and continues to both haunt and inspire him to this day.
Number 2. He killed Charlemagne. In the one-shot Spider-Man vs. Wolverine from 1987, we get to witness an epic showdown between these two fan favorites. Peter winds up in Germany investigating a mysterious arms dealer. Charlemagne turns out to be an old associate of Wolverine's, and she's got all kinds of people after her. They track her to East Berlin, where Wolverine plans to kill her, sparing her from being tortured by the KGB. Spider-Man isn't really cool with the whole killing her part of the plan, so the two of them have a bit of a fight about it. However, after a helicopter breaks up the fight for a second, Peter's Spidey sense kicks in, and thinking that Wolverine is behind him, he turns around and delivers a full-powered punch, instantly killing Charlemagne. It's implied that she probably intended for this to happen as she was wanting to die and stuff, but still, if you had told me that Spider-Man once punched a woman with no superpowers and killed her in one hit, I'd be a little skeptical. But it really happened.
Number 1, probably killed Gwen Stacy. Once again, Peter is causing harm to those he loves. What's more, this whole moment where he attempted to save Gwen and we hear her neck snap is made even worse for Peter in terms of his own guilt over the situation by the fact that he never really knows if it was him or if it was Green Goblin who is to blame for her death. Was she dead before he grabbed her, or did she die when his webbing latched on to save her, breaking her neck? We still don't really know for sure, although I think Green Goblin claims that she died while she was falling. He's like, a fall like that, she died before she hits the ground. And I'm like, wait, is that how falling works? It's not. Anyways. I mean, either way, Peter Parker is kind of to blame here, as Green Goblin has a tendency to target those that Spider-Man loves. So once again, just loving Gwen was in a way a terrible thing for him to do to her.
Kicking off the list at number 10, put on a show. Okay, Peter's life is pretty balanced. I mean, he takes selfies for the Daily Bugle, gets a little bit of cash, gets thrown off a building, has to fight a giant lizard, you name it. With Peter's life, his superhero and work go hand in hand. So in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 4, released back in 1963, we see Peter and he had just finished laying out Sandman, but he forgot to snag a couple of photos of the action. He didn't take any selfies, which is the worst. It's like when you blow candles out on your cake and then your mom's like, nope, you blinked, light them up again. Gotta keep trying this, it's for the scrapbook, let's go. Then you're like, I'm tired. So Peter grabs sand, like just sand off the ground, tosses it up in the air, and then punches through the sand. He's like, yeah, people are gonna buy this, it's the Sandman. And then people do buy it. What a liar. He comes back in all cool, out of breath, like, good people, you can breathe easy. Meanwhile, his Instagram is just popping off with likes. God, what a liar. I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do. You gotta get clout. You gotta get that super clout. And before we list off some more of Peter's dark days, if you guys could go ahead and toss us a thumbs up, because it really helps us out here at the studio. If we get enough likes, they won't kill me. Number 9. Giving away Edith. Following the events of Avengers Endgame, aka the Snappening, we see Peter Parker trying to move on in a very new world, while mourning the loss of a co-worker and father figure that is Tony Stark. He wants to just live a normal life. He wants to go away on a trip with his friends and not have any moons hucked at him from any Titans. So after trying to ghost Nick Fury in the process, he's handed down Edith, Tony's sweet AI glasses. After a mix-up that almost had his classmate executed by one of Tony's drones, he decides that the handsome, caped, random Jake Gyllenhaal that just came out of nowhere as Mysterio is a safe bet for the tech. I mean, he looks great in the glasses, but like, it's Jake Gyllenhaal, he's gonna look great in anything. But come on, Peter, you think after toying with Stark's suit years before that maybe it's a little bit too much responsibility? I'll get into that later. Number 8, the Betty Brant affair.
Hey, Betty.
So Betty is a staff member at the Daily Bugle. She's been played by Elizabeth Banks in the Tobey Maguire trilogy, and Angourie Rice plays a younger version of her in the new MCU Tom Holland version. Believe it or not though, Betty was actually the first woman that Peter was attracted to when he first started selling photos to the Daily Bugle. So they dated for a bit, but ultimately it didn't work out. No biggie, it happens. Cut to years down the road, Peter's marriage proposal didn't work out too well. She said no, and Betty's marriage to Ned at this point was also not working out. She was having a bit of a rough patch. So she went to Peter for some comfort, and then the obvious happened. She's still married, Pete. Don't do it.
Your shots are so good.
I'd love to shoot you sometime.
Peter Parker. Peter.
Number 7, more secrets. Marriage is a big deal, as we kind of just mentioned. I mean, maybe in comic books they happen way more often than they should. So many characters get divorced every other day, I swear. Like, divorce lawyers must make millions of dollars in the comics. Holy shit. But the whole point of a proper marriage is to have everything out there on the table, right? You have to know everything about your significant other. No secrets. I mean, sure, if you're Spider-Man, you have to keep some things to yourself, like the fact that you're Spider-Man. Because maybe your friends will go and say something and then the Green Goblin will hear and then he'll blow up your house or something, or toss your aunt out of a window. I get it. But MJ already knew about Peter Parker being Spider-Man. Of course she did. So right after he had resumed taking on the mantle of the webhead again, he failed to fill in MJ. Yeah, he told her he'd quit and then he didn't tell her that he was, not quitting anymore. Like, dude, she already knew before. Stop making up lies. What are you, Walter White? It's very obvious you're up to something. Everybody's onto it. Number 6, blackmail for a date. So that One More Day storyline that has been mentioned before in our channel that I'll talk about a little bit more at the end of this list is a pretty pivotal moment in Spider-Man comics.
So after this deal had taken place, Spider-Man was now single and ready to mingle. So in Miss Marvel issue 34, we see a new Peter bump into Miss Marvel. And she's in the middle of this sketchy and totally unplanned mission, as Peter puts it, with the CIA. And she can't use her powers, and she's currently on the run from Norman Osborn, who turned S.H.I.E.L.D. into Hammer at this point. It's wild. So bumping into Peter was pretty ideal at this point. He webbed her to safety, all the while they bickered at each other trying to figure out what's going on, what they're up to, what their real intentions are. And then Carol thanks him with a super knee, bam, right between the legs, and then explains to Peter that she needs his help, which is a good order. That's how you do things in that order. I need help. Can you drive me to the airport? If I do this, says Pete, then I want a date with you, which we see come to fruition 13 issues later. So when Carol responded surprised, he even acknowledged that he didn't realize he was gonna say that until it came out. Cool, maybe it just slipped out. But then once she leaves and agrees to it, he's like, yo, I think I just got a date, score. Come on, Pete. A lot of come on Pete's in this, eh? A lot of just what are you doing, dude? Number 5, truce? Question mark? So at some point it's fair to make a truce, okay? Maybe the conflicts just don't have realistic expectations, and then both parties are like, you know what, this has gone on way too long, let's just call it, no hard feelings. Bam. Like Spider-Man 3, when Pete and Harry teamed up to save the day against Venom and Sandman. That was a great moment. Moviegoers were thrilled to see the end of Bad Boy James Franco and Bad Boy Tobey Maguire. Like, just stop dancing and snapping at people. Just fight. I don't know. But in the comics, he made a pretty questionable truce with Venom. And it all happens in The Amazing Spider-Man 375. Spider-Man's parents get kidnapped by Venom. So he's like, no problem. I'll just roll up with your ex-wife. What's up? Let's make a deal. What do you got? So Spider-Man saved her life, so in return, a truce was to be made. I mean, sure, this was the kickoff to Venom becoming an anti-hero, and then he can have his own run, but also, it's Venom, you know?
Christineth, are you stupid or are you deaf?
Number 4, the fairy incident. Spider-Man Homecoming. Okay, so after intimidating Aaron Davis with his cool, deep voice, Spider-Man figured out the next move for the arms dealers. So Pete decides to take matters into his own hands and prove that he's worthy of being a suitable Avenger. See, this was right after Tony recruited him to help take down Team Cap in Civil War. So he was warm, he got a taste of the action, and now he wants to do more. That's fair, that's why we love Spider-Man. So the Staten Island Ferry was the next location for the Vulture's arms deal to go down. Let's do it, we got the intel, we're rolling in. So he says some quips, webs a few bad guys up, but the Vulture's Chitauri weapon was just too much for Peter to handle, resulting in the ferry to split in half. Right down the middle too, not even like Titanic. So in a last attempt to keep the civilians safe, he tries to hold on to both sides, which is a sick moment. It's kind of like a homage to other Spider-Man moments. It's great, but people are in danger. People are about to drown. There's like cars that are sinking. It's bad. And thankfully, with Iron Man's surprise arrival, the passengers were saved. Tony was pissed though. He had this whole setup. There was an inside operation, and then Spidey came in and blew it. And he didn't even tell Tony about what he was doing to make matters all the worse, which resulted in Tony taking back the Spider-Man suit. It's always the worst part, right after a breakup. You're like, fine, here's your nice sweater. God, I'm so cold now. Number 3, evil assassin Spider-Man. We go now to Earth 8351, where Spider-Man and Wolverine are training together in Alaska. Nice and cold. So they're trying to go rogue. So they're working on becoming stronger, and they're training, they're having a good time. Now, this Peter Parker, he's a bit more rough around the edges. Even his famous catchphrase is now slightly different. See, in this universe, it is, with great power comes great responsibility and greater enemies, which I like more. It's honest, it's definitely better. Doesn't roll off the tongue, but it's a step in the right direction. And it makes sense why he's going rogue. He's truly trying to protect his friends and family, and saying those few extra words at the end just reaffirms his only goal. So when they're attacked, Spider-Man tells Wolverine just to keep hitting people while he deals with a bad guy wielding not one, but 2 swords. So Spider-Man tries webbing him up, and the swords don't allow that. And Spider-Man even gets laughed at for attempting to do this. And Spider-Man says, you're right, that's not gonna work. Bam, shoots him in the face. Huh? They held off long enough until S.H.I.E.L.D. arrived. I mean, sure, this Spider-Man is a different version, but it's still Spider-Man, right? Like, regardless of the title on the front page, this is a moment most fans remembered long after the pages were closed. He like did a cool peace sign too, and then the bullets popped out of his wrist. It was cool. He's like, hey, smell this, bam. Smell this, why the fuck would he say that? Number 2, Hit Mary Jane. Spectacular Spider-Man issue 226, we see Ben Reilly and Peter Parker, and the tension is high. They're trying to prove who the real Spider-Man is. It's during all the clone stuff, and they reach a conclusion that Ben Reilly is in fact the real Spider-Man. He is the real father. He is the father. Peter doesn't respond to this well at all. He's upset, obviously. He's watching his entire life basically get stolen in front of him. And then MJ tries to get in the middle, and cool everything down, and Peter instinctively just brushes her off, yelling to leave him alone. Now, you can't really brush somebody off of you when you can lift, I don't know, a bus. He's strong, he's really strong. So him just doing that in a matter of rage, she went flying. And to make matters somehow worse, she was pregnant. Yeah, she was pregnant. And he quickly knew he had messed up, saying, oh God, what have I done? What kind of man am I? I'll tell you what kind of man you are, Spider-Man. You're a guy who gets on a lot of lists of people getting in trouble. That's what you are. Kidding, you're a gem. Stop hitting people. And finally, number 1. The deal with the devil. I mentioned this earlier, now it's time to get into it. Look, sometimes Peter will try and do the right thing. Well, most of the time he'll do the right thing. But then life just gets even harder for him after that. And then he's presented with a new issue to face, and it's like an over and over again thing. It's just a nightmare. And then in 2007, starting with the Amazing Spider-Man issue 544, the storyline One More Day, it's exactly what might happen if you revealed your identity to the public. Following in the footsteps of Tony Stark in the Civil War II storyline, where Peter revealed his true identity in order to support the Superhero Registration Act. So giving out your last name to supervillains, cool, great idea, awesome, nothing bad's gonna happen at all. This of course resulted in Aunt May getting shot, and in order to save her life, he must make a deal with the devil, literally Mephisto. And in doing so, the world will also forget about Peter's true identity. Not a bad deal. The only catch is that Mephisto takes away the marriage of Peter and Mary Jane. And I don't mean a quickie divorce and he's like, hey, sign here, poof. No, I mean it never happened. The relationship is gone, and at the turn of a page, the marriage was just no more. All those memories, all those moments, gone just like that.
Kicking it off with giving up his marriage to Mephisto, what even was that? Peter, this whole thing was super frustrating because it was just kind of strange. I get why it happened. From the outside, like, Peter and MJ had been together for decades and Marvel wanted to explore different stories and relationships for the hero, but people loved this couple, so having them break up was definitely gonna ruffle some feathers. But they didn't even break up in like a normal way. Peter literally made a deal with the devil. They didn't just break up. The devil deal erased their marriage from existence. It never happened. And that's where a lot of people were lost. This whole thing happened because Aunt May wasn't feeling so good and Peter couldn't bear to let his mother figure go. So when presented with the option to save her, he took it. It just so happened that the thing Mephisto wanted in return was Peter's marriage. Moving into some more like recent-ish activity, one of the most iconic fights of Spider-Man's career was Kraven's last hunt when Kraven buried him alive. It's now decades down the line and Spider-Man has given the villain a taste of his own medicine. Last summer's Amazing Spider-Man 33 featured an evil-infused Peter Parker getting some long overdue revenge for what happened to him back in the 80s. This time around, Spider-Man is the one hunting Kraven and throwing him 6 feet under. In his clouded with evil mind, Peter doesn't particularly care that the Kraven he's chasing now isn't the one that threw him under, deeming him close enough. The whole comic is showing a much colder side to Spider-Man readers aren't used to seeing, especially towards the end where Peter throws a weapon down into the casket, saying, in case you want to skip to the end, before closing it up and throwing the dirt. This was of course a reference to the original comic when Kraven ended it all with that same weapon. So yeah, Peter is pretty ruthless when he is forced to let go of his good guy nature. And he did not stop with Kraven. Evil Peter went after everybody. Tombstone was in the hospital on life support, and after burying Kraven, Spider-Man paid him a little visit, went right over to the ventilator and just yanked that out of the wall, escaping into the night in a flash of lightning, laughing his head off. In the end, the hospital staff was able to bring Tombstone back, but then Spider-Man went after Norman Osborn and Paul and Mary Jane. Luckily, no one was fatally injured in the end, but it wasn't cute. Spider-Man has generated millions in property damage over his crime-fighting career, and it's not always his fault. But in the case of Amazing Spider-Man 1, when he is trying to join the Fantastic Four, it was intentional. Spider-Man is looking for a super team with a salary, so he swings by the F4 headquarters. More specifically, he swings through a window, which triggers the defense measures. In this case, it's a big plexiglass cage that costs the team tens of thousands in today's money. Spider-Man is first, breaking into their headquarters, and second, potentially damaging very delicate, very expensive machinery. I can't imagine that this would ever help his case, and after he does end up escaping, he fights the team and literally throws some of them around the room. It's only when he finds out that the F4 wouldn't pay him that he actually gets out of there. Now this is pretty tame in comparison to like burying someone or unplugging their life support, but it's not exactly Peter's finest moment either. Peter Parker's roast of Harry Osborn in the PS5 Spider-Man 2 game is completely out of pocket, and yet surprisingly not that out of character considering he had a sim connected to him at the time. It deserved a spot because it's not funny, but it's a little funny. Peter, MJ, and Harry are having a disagreement because Peter has been acting weird. Both MJ and Harry ask Peter to give up the sim suit. Peter doesn't want to, he's on edge. It's also important to note that Harry is visibly sick in this moment. When Peter is showing hesitation to give up the suit, Harry makes a side comment and Peter took that personally. For some reason, he decides to go straight for the jugular with the response, "Why don't you pop some more pills and say what you're really feeling?" Harry was not doing a thing to Peter in this particular moment. He was literally just sitting in a chair and Peter went off. So Peter, please relax. Peter's show of strength against Captain America and Amazing Spider-Man 23 was unexpected to say the least. To set the scene, Peter is on the run and he hasn't looked worse. Very much at the end of his rope, as he is running through an alley, Captain America suddenly turns up to try and talk and help out the young hero, but again, Peter is not even at the end of his rope anymore, he's let go of it. Out of pure frustration, Peter grabs Cap's shield from him and full on slams it into his face hard enough for it to crack. He cracked Captain America's shield on Captain America's face, and that is so embarrassing, I'm gonna be so honest. And adding salt to the wound, Peter did escape, slipped away. Okay, so this next one isn't really Peter's fault because he didn't know, but he does hate himself for it. So in the limited series Spider-Man Reign, we meet a Peter that has seen better days. We are in a future with no heroes. The city has fallen into ruins. At this point, Peter is old and has not been Spider-Man for a long time, no plans to ever do it again. A bright spot is that Peter got to marry his longtime love, Mary Jane. The two loved each other a lot, but learned the hard way that Peter was radioactive and anything that he produces is also radioactive, so like if you know, you know. Prolonged exposure to this radioactivity caused MJ to develop cancer and ultimately pass away. This is not an easy thing for anyone to deal with, but Peter feels extremely guilty and is grappling with the fact that his superpowers, which were supposed to be a really good thing, ended up being his lover's demise. Adding on top of that, as Mary Jane was laying in her hospital bed, Peter had to step out to stop a crime, only to find out that in his absence, she passed on, and that guilt has and will weigh on him for the rest of his life. Now again, this is not really Peter's fault. Is it his fault? It's up for debate, though this is definitely one of the worst things Peter has done and has had done to him at the same time. I am referring to that time he became a zombie in Marvel Zombies Dead Days. After being bit, Spider-Man desperately tries to get MJ and Aunt May to a safe location, but the zombification happens too quickly and the hunger kicks in, and I'm sure you can guess what happened to the two women. The brutal part is, Peter knows what's happening and he feels all the pain and guilt afterward. Again, he didn't want to do it, the hunger made him do it. The zombie infestation on Earth gets so bad that these super zombies start jumping across the universe in search of food, making this everyone else's problem too. Spider-Man is the first of the zombies to have his evil hunger taken care of. He eventually makes it to a universe where he can make the cure, so happy ending at least. The 80s were the time for a black-suited Peter Parker to constantly be put in stressful situations. Okay, so we are looking at Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 110. In this one, Peter's first love, Betty, was kidnapped by the villain Sin Eater, and it was not looking good. Spider-Man teams up with Daredevil to get her back. The two crash into the room and quickly disarm and knock out the villain. But in a very out-of-character moment, Spider-Man literally starts to hit a guy while he's down. It gets to the point where Daredevil has to physically step in between the villain and Peter. This of course ends in a fight between the two heroes, with Daredevil thrown out the window and him admitting that if Spider-Man was in a more sound frame of mind, he would come out on top. Spider-Man is not one to really permanently end somebody, but every once in a while mistakes do happen. A pretty nasty one took place in Spider-Man vs. Wolverine. Towards the end of the comic, Spider-Man and Wolverine are fighting in a graveyard. Now both of these heroes are like the strongest and the toughest there is, which means they aren't exactly pulling throwing punches. In fact, they're putting everything they have into their attacks. Also present in the mix here is a human woman named Charlie that both parties are trying to keep safe. Unfortunately, Charlie got a bit too close to the action and set off Peter's spider sense. Thinking it was Wolverine, a very stressed and tired Peter turned around and threw everything he had left into a punch. The kind of punch a Wolverine could survive, but definitely not your average person. The thing is though, is Charlie wanted that to happen. Wolverine literally explains that on panel, so now Spider-Man is being haunted by this guilt when it was what she really wanted all along. It's completely messed up, but when is his spider trauma not?